Good morning. I think it's still morning to anybody that is popping on. Today is Wednesday, February 10th, and we are here with Tim Brunner of Axis Design Group. He'll tell you a little bit about a company, what he does, and a little bit of background on him. Excuse me. Pull up the email I have. Tim graduated from Sam Barlow High School in 1988 and attended the University of Oregon, where he graduated in 1993. He worked for several firms in Portland and Vancouver, architectural design firms, from 1990 to 2000. And in March 2000, he founded Axis Design Group and celebrated 20 years of business in 2020. And that's quite an accomplishment. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Axis is an architecture group that, architecture firm, excuse me, that does architecture, interior design, and land use planning, which is really interesting to me. So I'll turn it over to you, Tim, for your presentation, and take her away.
Okay, great. Asha, do we know like who is on, or if this is high school and junior high?
High school mainly.
Great, awesome. Well, for those of you that maybe attend Sam Barlow High School, you may have seen this before at a career day several years ago, though. It was probably, gosh, 3 or 4 years ago. So hopefully it's fresh to everyone. So what I'll do is I'll just jump into my presentation. It's a little bit about me, which was already started, but what I wanted to point out is where I really first got interested in architecture is my father actually had a good friend who was an architect in Portland. And so it kind of intrigued me, but it was actually my high school counselor at Barlow High School back in 1984, 1985, back in the cool 80s, that really got me going in this career. Matter of fact, he is still around. It's Mr. Jim Babson, who I believe is a track coach. He may have retired actually now from doing that, but he was around for a long time there at Barlow High School. He took the time to actually give me a tour of an architecture firm in downtown Portland called ZGF Architects. They're probably one of the largest firms in Portland. And it really inspired me to want to go into architecture. But my path to architecture was not art per se, as far as drawings. It was more music. I was very involved in music at Barlow High School. I was in the All Northwest band, All State band, state solo contest winner a couple of years, and I focused on my trombone. I love playing the trombone, but that was a creative avenue for me. So don't think like architecture necessarily starts with your art class, although that's very good. For me, it didn't. It was more of music and the creativity that comes out of playing music. So graduated in 88, went to University of Oregon, graduated from there in 93. And then I worked for several firms in the metro area and Vancouver. And then in 2000, I started my own firm. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what architecture is, and we'll kind of go through this to give you kind of some ideas and inspiration of what it is. It's a professional career, if you will. The degree that you receive from college is actually a Bachelor of Architecture degree rather than a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science. So it's a professional degree that you get, very similar to maybe an attorney is a profession, a CPA, doctors, that sort of thing. What do architects do? Architects design places. So they design buildings, of course. They also design outdoor spaces. They are very involved, as I have been, in my community, which is Gresham, and the outlying communities around Fairview and Troutdale and Wood Village. So you design a lot of different things, and you're trained in school to really learn about that. So it's not just the typical, oh, we're going to go design a building, but it's really what kind of spaces are created around the building. What is the streetscape like? Maybe it's a park. Maybe it's a those sorts of things. Maybe it's a community space in the center of a downtown, like Pioneer Place in downtown Portland was designed by an architect in town. So it's kind of kind of neat because architecture is a very broad career field. So you get to learn about a lot of things. These are some kind of wild examples of a couple of projects, but and these are actually, the bottom right is a actual photograph, but I believe the other two are actually computer animations that were done for new projects. And so architecture designs and buildings and spaces, but our job is how do we allow or help people to see something new that was created before it's built. Architecture is also a beautiful combination of art and science, and we'll talk briefly about that. Architecture is a very technical career, so we deal with things like codes and math and science and things like that, but it's also art because we create buildings that are beautiful, buildings that people will dwell in, live in, work in, go to school in, whatever that may be. So these buildings affect people's lives. They're buildings that people interact with every day. I'm going to talk real brief here about kind of skill sets. And we're going to actually start, you know, if you picture yourself in high school right now and just what am I learning in high school? There are many skill sets that architecture really helps you with, or skill sets that are good to have that help you in architecture, I should say. But what you're going to learn is they're really skill sets that can help you in a lot of different career fields. So one obvious one is artistic and creative. It's being able to think of ideas and concepts that aren't reality yet, right? They're virtual, they're in your mind, they're ideas, and it's how do you take that idea and then put that to paper, so to speak, or in your computer. Collaboration. So when you're working in your math class or your science class in a lab, or you have some sort of a team type project in high school, that's actually a really good experience. It's actually a really good experience for life. But in architecture, we work in teams. In my own firm, I have 10 employees, and we work in teams of 2, 3, 4 people at a time on a project. So you're collaborating with different personalities, different ideas, and you have to learn how to manage that. Being a problem solver is really important. Being able to take a concept or an idea and break it down so that you can create a solution. So that's a very good skill set to have. Architects are very detail oriented because architecture is about details. So not only are we doing big ideas and big concepts of a building or a city block, but then you're thinking about the doors, and you're thinking about the materials on the wall and how the light enters the room. So there's a lot of details involved. Having good communication skills. You know, one thing I never did in high school was be in a debate class. I always, boy, let me tell you, I wish I did, or doing speeches in class, because we have to do presentations to people. And they might be in small groups, they might be in large groups. I think the largest group I did a presentation on was probably about 50 people. So you need to be able to work in different environments. You need to be able to write well and be able to speak clearly. Hopefully I'm doing that for you today. Being a good listener. Our job is to listen to our client and learn what their objective is, to learn what their plan or ideas are, the spaces that they may need. So it's a lot of listening. I always laugh, you know, when we were born, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's so we can listen twice as much as we talk, right? And so for me, that's really important when I'm talking with my clients and listening to what their needs are, and also my employees. It's very important to be able to work when you're in a team environment. You need to be able to listen as much as you can speak. Leadership skills. So, you know, architects are the leader of most projects. So We collaborate and bring on other consultants. They might be structural engineers that design how the building stands up. They might be acoustical engineers that help with making sure the building is comfortable to be in and not too much noise. We would collaborate with interior designers. We would collaborate with people that design the mechanical, the heating and cooling system in a building. They're called mechanical engineers. Same with electrical engineers. And we're usually the lead on that project, on a project to take and coordinate all of these different consultants. So having leadership skills is really important and being able to organize all of these people. Being able to speak publicly, I'm kind of doing that now, although I wish I could be with you all. I would much rather prefer that, but here we are. It's a new world, I guess. So, but being able to present ideas, this picture is actually very informative because it reminds me of my college days, and even now when we do presentations, they may be on a wall like this, more often now they're on the computer as well. You can even see some of the computer or some of the models that were created of a building that this student is actually presenting. Sales. This is a skill set not everybody has. And it really, I think in architecture, it really categorizes people into where their skill sets are, because sales is really important in architecture because you have to get new projects. How do you do that? Are you involved in the community? Are you outgoing to where you can reach out to clients, potential clients, and market yourself? So sales is a really important function to have, especially if you're an owner of a firm. You may work for a firm and never have to do this, and that's okay. There's no problem with that. Matter of fact, most architects are not salespeople. Most architects are generally maybe a little more introverted and maybe a little bit more in the details and maybe not as equipped for sales. But if you're a person that has that ability, that's very valuable in architecture. Working under pressure, you know, and you have deadlines at school, those are really good training. That's a good training place because there's a lot of that. A lot of pressure in architecture with regards to deadlines and being able to manage a client's, you know, what their calendar is to be able to move into their building and to hit milestones along the way. It's very important. Basic understanding, math, science, scale, and spatial understanding. This is, you know, I never took I took algebra. I never took calculus. I didn't need it for architecture, but I took a lot of math and algebra and stuff, which I use almost every day when we're working on drawings. But it's not advanced math. It's more of the basic math. A lot of people think, oh, you got to be really good at math and science to be in architecture. And you really don't, but you do need to have a very basic understanding of math and science. Materials that we specify in buildings is all about the science. So you learn a lot even after college when you get into the career about the science of products and how they're made. Computer skills, essential. We use AutoCAD, we use Revit a lot, and SketchUp. These are programs for designing buildings and creating drawings. We also use other programs like Word and PowerPoint. InDesign is one we use for presentations. So having computer skills to be able to do that, and of course for all of you, that's secondhand. In my generation, it wasn't, but it's something that you are on a computer pretty much 8 hours a day. So you spend a lot of time in front of the screen. The other one is graphic design. I kind of hit on this a minute ago, but InDesign is a program we use. Illustrator, Photoshop, these are really powerful programs when we're doing presentations for projects. And then some basic understandings of construction. When I was actually in college, I worked with a contractor, and that was really valuable for me because I saw how buildings went together. And that was very helpful for me in understanding how to do drawings of buildings. So a general understanding of construction, and this is taught in college, and then you get experience too when you get a job out of college in construction. What does a workday look like for an architect? Spend a lot of time on the phone. We have meetings. Of course, all these meetings now are in the office. You can see over here, we have fun in our office. Here we're having a Star Wars theme. That was actually a Mountain Community College Foundation fundraiser many years ago that we went to. We also spent a lot of time corresponding, emailing, a lot of time on the computer, and then a lot of time managing projects. We might go on a construction site like this when the project actually goes into construction. I included some information that people always want to know. How much money do you make? You know, is this a career that's worth going into? And so I tried to outline this. This was from a couple of years ago, but it still applies. So architects, you can see, you know, what the range is. You know, you're kind of in that $50,000, $50,000 starting out, and it can just go up from there. It just depends on what your role is, your licensing. Do you own a firm or not? What does it require to get there? Generally speaking, most programs are 5-year college university programs, although there are some that are 4-year that are out there. And then with the 5-year, you get a Bachelor of Architecture degree. That's what I did. Or you might have an undergraduate degree in something else like business or something like that. If you come and then get your Master's of Architecture, it usually takes a couple of years to get that. In the Northwest, there are several universities that have accredited architecture firms. So that's important. If you're interested in architecture, go to an accredited school of architecture so that you can get your license later, which I'll talk about in a moment. Portland State University, University of Oregon, University of Washington, Washington State, and University of Idaho all have accredited programs. Of course, there's many in California and throughout the United States, but it's important that you understand that an accredited program is important. Interior designers, you can kind of see where they're at, and their degrees they can be 2-year associate degrees all the way up to 4- and 5-year bachelor degrees. And you can see where some of those are. One of the things that I need to take off of here is the Art Institute is no longer open. They actually closed a couple years ago and are no longer around, unfortunately, because I've had actually several interior designers work for me that went there and they had a wonderful education there. And then some people choose, they just love working on the computer and they want to be a CAD technician, and that's great. I have one that's worked for me for a very long time, and he's awesome. And he is basically does drafting and building measurements and things like that for me. And so it kind of shows you here where that is. That can tend to have a cap on your salary though in that kind of a degree. There we go. So steps to take when you're in high school, what I recommend doing is get out and job shadow. If you ever want to shadow at my firm, you're more than welcome to. I love to do that. I think that's part of our responsibility as architects to make sure we're reaching out to students and young students and give them opportunities to come into our firm and see what we do. That's really good because you might go, wow, I would never want to do that, right? But you also might say, yeah, that's kind of cool. You know, I like what they do on the computers and it's pretty awesome. So it might help you decide that that's a career for you. You know, take classes that are relative to architecture that relate, like art, music, speech, debate, writing, math, science, computer classes. These are all things that are important. And you know what? These are great things for any career that you go into. So when you're in your math class and you're learning about the Pythagorean theorem in algebra, don't say this sucks and I'll never use this. I use that all the time actually in what I do. When you're calculating areas of buildings or volumes of spaces, that sort of thing, it actually does help you. The same thing with art, that creative outlet, and music as well. Speech and debate, you know, you're learning how to feel comfortable in front of people and speak. These are very important skill sets and very relative. And or relevant rather in what I do in architecture. So if you're interested in even familiarizing yourself with programs, you can get student versions of AutoCAD and Revit, and there's YouTube videos you can watch out there on design, which are pretty sweet. So I have a daughter who's a senior in high school this year, and she was totally stoked because she did not have to take the SAT to get into college. So she was pretty excited about that. And my oldest daughter, who's done with college, was really angry with her that she didn't have to go through that. But you know, I say, here, take the SAT, and who knows where that's going to end up. And again, this was from pre-COVID presentation, so that will change, I'm sure. Apply for colleges, you know, look at the different programs that are out there. My daughter's a senior, just applied, and is going to be going to California Baptist University in Riverside, California. And there's only 2 private universities in the United States that have accredited architecture programs, and actually School of Architecture and Visual Arts. And they're one of them. But visit universities, learn about them, go online, do virtual tours. Even if you're a sophomore or junior, start thinking about these things, because it's actually very exciting to think about post high school and where you're going to go next, the field that you're going to go into. And make sure you keep your grades up. You need to usually have at least a 3.0 or better GPA even to get into the architecture programs. They can be pretty competitive sometimes to get into. So check into that as early as you can. So in college, I mentioned briefly, but you know, they are usually 4 to 5 year accredited programs to get a bachelor degree in architecture. I would recommend getting out into the field as soon as you can. So you can do summer internships in firms, and during college, even I actually started doing that in high school. I just went and made copies for a firm because I just wanted to learn what it was like and learn the environment. So get out and don't be afraid to call someone or call me. Most architects are very open to that. So after you graduate, you know, from architecture, to really call yourself an architect, you have to be licensed. And so licensing takes time after college. You actually work for a firm here for, you know, 3 to 4 years before you're able to even test for your exam. And I think this is shortened up now a little bit because you can actually get some credit when you're in college. That might take a couple of years now rather than 3 to 4 years. It took me about 4 years before I was able to sit down and do my test. The test is this ARE, or Architectural Registration Exam. There's now 6 separate tests that you have to take. It might be on structures, it might be on the environment, site planning, lots of different parts of this test. When I took it, there were 9. So, hey, good for you guys. There'll be less testing later for you guys, but they're long tests and kind of grueling, but you can get in study groups with others that are trying to do the same thing. And there's a lot of testing material out there to learn and practice. After you pass all of those exams, you take a state test, which is basically on the rules and the laws of in the state that you're in. For me, I'm licensed in Oregon, Washington, Arizona, and Wisconsin, actually. So you learn to take these tests and you learn about the rules and regulations of those states. And then once you get your license, you get the benefit of staying in school for the rest of your life. So continuing education is something that you have to do to maintain your license. So I do 24 credit hours of classes every 2 years. So I go to conferences. Of course, now it's online, and lots of different things that I have to do just to maintain that beautiful stamp with my horrible signature. So, you know, that's how you become an architect and stay an architect, is you're constantly learning. And in our industry, you're always learning because materials change, rules and laws change, codes change on buildings, these sorts of things. So you're always learning new things. So that's my brief, maybe not so brief, introduction to architecture. and it's a lot of information thrown at you. I know this is recorded, so you can go back and look at it, but I think now I'd be open for some questions. Hopefully that was helpful.
It was actually wildly helpful, and I know these are the kinds of things that the students want to know.
Sure.
You know, I think reality, like, we all need to know when we want to make money, right? Like, when we get out of school, how are we going to make a living? How am I going to keep a roof over my head? What am I doing next? I joke around with my friends. I'm like, man, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up yet.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, we all laugh about it, but at the same time, like, it takes a while to get there. And I wanted to say, I really appreciate you talking about your artistic experience, because I think, and myself included, a lot of times you don't really think about what it means to design a space where somebody's going to live, play, or work.
Yeah.
And I just look at that and think, God, that was so much math, like so much geometry. And I'm not really thinking about it in terms of, I've played the piano for most of my life.
Yeah.
And so I never really thought about that as a creative outlet. You know, materials. I worked in the timber industry for just under 2 years for the American Forest Resource Council. And the new thing that was coming up was cross-laminated timber. And then a lot of the buildings started coming out. And so that was really fascinating to me. And I'm sure being in school for the rest of your life, for those of us that enjoy learning, it's not too bad when you have to learn about exciting new things like that. And I'm sure it's trying to figure out now, how do I introduce that into my next project? Is that something the client wants?
Exactly.
So you really covered a lot of it. I guess you covered my education question and options to get started. And I can't echo the job shadow / tour / just go in and figure out whether you like it. I did that with a physical therapist and actually my orthopedic surgeon. I was able to shadow them a couple times, and man, I learned real quick that was not what I wanted to do, but I was still really fascinated by it.
Sure.
So what motivates you about your field? You know, you've shared kind of how you got into it, but what keeps you motivated?
Wow, that's a great question. You know, this past year celebrated our 20th year with the firm, and I kind of laugh. I look back and I go, wow, you know, that's pretty cool. It also makes me exhausted sometimes to think about. But I also look at it and I go, wow, what a blessing that I can do something I enjoy doing for so long. You know, and the reason why I enjoy doing is a couple of things. One is I have amazing staff in my firm, and working in an environment where there's fun people to be around and to collaborate with kind of keeps me going. The other thing that really keeps me going is my clients. I really love working with people. Now, clients can be also a pain in the rear because, you know, everybody has needs and some are realistic and some are not. So it's managing that can be hard. But what I think about often is I think about the people that are going to interact in the buildings that I've worked on or that I've designed, and people that maybe live there or work there. You know, we do a fair amount of assisted living and senior housing projects, and I think of the elderly that are living there and the employees that are working there, and how the building that we did is hopefully somehow helping them through that process. To me, that's kind of cool. It's kind of exciting. You know, this is it's a crazy world out there, and it's important to be doing something that you like. My thing is, you know, when you go to the checkout counter and the store and there's somebody that's upset and angry working there, I'm like, why don't you try something else? You know, because there's so many things people can do, students can do. You know, your your options are wide open right now. So find something you enjoy doing, and do not be afraid to pick up the phone and call someone and try to internship and get out there and make sure it's something that you want to do. If I may say something, my oldest daughter, who graduated 6 years ago from high school, she wanted to be a physical therapist because she had many knee surgeries. She was a really awesome athlete in high school and junior high. And She had dreams of playing collegiate basketball, and that kind of came to an end in high school when she had these knee surgeries, but she really was inspired by her physical therapist. And so she wanted to go to school for kinesiology and to get into that. And I said, well, why don't you, because I knew her personality, and I said, why don't you go and shadow in some of those physical therapy clinics and just see if that's really what you want to do. And so we had to force her to make a call because she wouldn't. She was kind of embarrassed or maybe a little shy. Which was funny because she was not a shy person, but she just didn't want to reach out and do that. Well, she finally did and realized, oh my gosh, Dad, I could never do that. Like I could never sit still that long and just watch someone else exercise. It just drives me nuts. And so that was a good thing, right? And job shadowing is really good to it, even more so to learn what you don't want to do as much as what you want to do.
I think we focus so much in education. I think they focus a lot on like next steps. Sure, you need to know what you're maybe wanting to take the next step to do. But I always told my kids, I worked at Job Corps for 5 years and I've spent the bulk of my career in workforce development. And when I was working with the Summer Works program, I told the kids, I'm like, did you like it? And they're like, eh. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now you know what you don't want to do. And the look that they would give me. And I'm like, you realize that's okay, right? It's okay to not love everything that's out there. It's okay to go into an internship and be like, I hated it at the end of it. As long as you showed up and did what you needed to do to finish it, it's okay to not love everything in the world, because that way you don't have to wonder, oh God, should I have gone into physical therapy? Would have I loved it? Well, no, I wouldn't have. And now I don't regret that, right? Now I know what I don't want to do. And, speaking of the store thing, like I said, I've worked in workforce development for the bulk of my career. And after working with 16 to 24-year-old opportunity youth for about 10 years, I needed a little bit of a break. And I had the opportunity to go to work at Cabela's for 3 years as their marketing manager. And I learned so much about myself, about corporate branding, about strategy, about really unhappy people in retail. I was the only happy person in the store on Black Friday. I loved Black Friday because I had a blast. I loved what I did. And I love what I do now, but I loved what I did. And I was always, I got to plan the party for Black Friday, so I got to have the fun times where I show up with food and prizes and stuff like that. Like everybody loved to see me, so it was fun. But it was really a great reminder of like, it might take you a little while, but definitely find what you don't want to do. And then, you kind of answered this question already, but, you did a great job answering the career options. I think it's important to know, like, working for an architecture firm isn't just being an architect, that you partner with all of these different folks. But then, what's the best piece of advice besides just internships? Because that's come across clear. What's your best piece of advice for a student looking to get involved in a field? Is it to take the initiative to look at look at videos or software? I mean, what would you name as like maybe your key looking back on your even 20 years of owning your own firm?
Yeah, so good question. I think if you're, in high school and you're wanting to learn more about architecture, there are tutorials out there and things that you can do with YouTube. I was just looking at this screen. This was quite a few years ago that we did this, but like this bank, that's all computer animation right there. It's not real. And it looks real, but it's not, and so if you like that sort of thing, downloading Revit or SketchUp would be, and just kind of playing around with it might be kind of inspiring, and seeing what other people do with it online is pretty cool. So that would probably be a good place to start. I can't emphasize enough though, one thing that's cool about the architecture degree is it's actually a very well-rounded degree of balance of art and science. And there are a lot of students that graduate with architecture degrees that aren't even in architecture, and they go into other fields. Maybe it's in sales, or they work for a manufacturer of products, or building products or something, because maybe they like that sales side of it or that business side of it better. But what it's done is that education has really prepared them to be able to think clearly, to be able to problem solve, to be able to be creative. Sometimes when I'll sit and look at a project trying to design a building, I'll just get stymied. That means like I don't know what to do next, and I'll take a break. And I had a church that I designed down in the valley, and I could not figure it out of how I wanted to do it. And I remember going home on a Friday frustrated, waking up at about 3 a.m. on a Saturday, and I went into the office and I designed the building in an hour because it just came to me in a dream, like in the middle of the night. And so, that in what we ended up building was very close to that initial sketch that I had done. And so, so getting out there, seeing what other people do online, playing around with these programs, and then getting out into different firms if you can. And every firm in town is different. And there are a lot of firms in the Portland metro area, and they all specialize in different things. We've done everything from a bank like here, our firm, did the building that in downtown Gresham, where Cafe Delirium is. But we also do like this is a little drawing, but it's Powell Valley Elementary School. We worked on Gordon Russell Middle School's remodel that they just completed this year. So we do a lot of different types of projects. And so, as you learn about architecture, you might, want to, if you want to design museums, my firm's not where you should be because we don't do museums, but so once you even start learning about architecture firms, go on their websites even, and just see the types of projects they do and see if that interests you or intrigues you at all.
And that's actually a great segue. Just to lastly here wrap up, I had a question actually from a teacher who was looking to expose her students to someone in the green space or kind of green design area. What can you tell me about that? What does that mean in context of green or sustainable design?
Yeah, great question. One thing that there was a whole movement in architecture that started, probably 15 or 20 years ago. It's called LEED, Leaders in Environmental Something Design. I should know that, but sorry, I'm blanking at the moment. But LEED was a movement that really its sole purpose was to push the building code to become more sustainable and more green. And this LEED movement is kind of interesting to research, but really in my mind, the movement, it was never meant to last because the purpose of it was to push the code to become a new higher standard. And that's really what it's done. So if you're interested in that and in sustainable design, I early on in my career, I worked for an architect and we designed homes that were, this was back in the early 90s actually, and they were homes that were environmentally friendly, solar powered, made out of recycled materials. It was like it was before it was cool, like it is now. Like that's just what we did, and now of course it's all over the press and everybody's wanting to be sustainable. And it's like, oh, sheesh, I was doing that since the early 90s, it's like nothing new. And we had several amazing projects that we did. Got a lot of publicity here in the Portland metro area. So I'm probably not answering your question direct because there's so many resources out there, but start with, maybe Googling, looking up LEED and sustainable design. The universities are really, of course, that's a huge focus for them. The building codes now, like we're doing a brand new project for my father's house, and we're doing another big project for Snowcap, and they're both expanding and or relocating. And we've designed those buildings in a way. I should have updated my slides here so you could actually see it, because that's actually kind of a cool building. But my father's house building, but they're going to have solar on them. orientation of the building is important for daylighting. You know, how a building faces, you know, and treats the sunlight, you know, and how it uses the sunlight to light the spaces so you don't need lights on in the building. These are all basic principles and things that you do learn when you're in school.
Awesome. Well, Tim, I need to wrap this up, but I want to say sincerely, thank you for your time. This has been wildly educational for myself as well as I'm sure everybody else. And I've left, instead of stopping screen sharing, I went ahead and left your screen share on so that they can see your phone number and your email address, in case, again, I just want to say, when someone reaches out to you and says, hey, like, I want to learn about this, like, that's really exciting that we have people like you in our community that are willing to mentor and show people what that's about. So again, thank you so very much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.